these kind of larger merchants who are maybe more selective with how they go about piecing together their checkout and payments operations. What about, I'd like to touch upon that other merchant segment that I kind of laid out at the beginning of the conversation, the ones that kind of look for a one-stop shop. I don't know, does Adyen even serve this merchant segment?
Not really. I mean, it's not our core focus. We have developed more products that are like just plug and play, if you will, and we are sort of going more into the mid-market. But I think what you're describing is more the Stripe, and that's kind of what I described earlier with the kind of three ways of going about it, with the commodity type play, the functionality type play, or the developer type play. And this second segment here is certainly where that developer type play fits in, and it is mainly Stripe, or if they're in like an retail type environment, or it's very ultra like micro business where to an extent. It's like focusing on developers and making sure that they can just like put something in there. It's quick, it's easy. Stripe's done a really good job of building a community of developers, like running developer events, focusing on CTOs, like as the selling point instead of finance teams, all that sort of thing. So often we'll come to a scale-up company that's on Stripe, like they've always been on Stripe. The CTOs love them, the developers love them. So it's quite hard to get that buy-in to move away from Stripe because they've built such a strong brand or identity directly with the developers themselves. And to be honest, their functionality is quite good. Even though they are a gateway, they do everything relatively well. So, and I think that end of the market does just want something quick. And I know you sort of mentioned it initially about the other things like the trade financing and that side. I think the jury's still out on that. Like I can see why they would do it, and I think it's fairly accretive to them. It's not a lot of work, but I don't know if it will ever like be a significant part of their business. But I could be wrong. I don't know the inside of that, but I've never really heard anyone saying I use Stripe because I also get my financing through them, or X other product that they like non-payment product they might offer.
Right, makes sense. And do you think, because I've noticed that PSPs that serve larger segments typically aren't really doing much around that trade financing, is that just because these more complex organisations probably already have like more complex financing needs that they're kind of being catered to for already with their existing banking relationships? Or do you think that PSPs kind of enter more of the financing space going forward?
That's probably one aspect. I'd never really considered that. So I think you're definitely right in that. But I also think the other aspect is that because, let's just keep a Stripe in the example, but it could be Square as well, because they have such a huge user base, like in the hundreds of thousands, I believe. There's going to be enough firms or enough small companies that will use this, where, like I said, it's kind of accretive. Like maybe it'll add 3 or 5 or 10% to their bottom line over time. Whereas companies like the WorldPays and the Adyens and the Bank of Americas, one, you are right in that their merchants probably already have these solutions, but two, might only have 10,000 merchants in their portfolio. So it doesn't really make sense to diversify away from payments. Like you're better off focusing on payments products as opposed to adding in other products.
Yeah, makes sense. And I suppose because that's where the kind of innovative risk or scoring comes in, doesn't it? When you can actually like use things like artificial intelligence or whatever, you actually need quite a big data set to make that work. So I guess that doesn't really make sense if you've got kind of a smaller but more high-end merchant base that you're working with.
Exactly.
And you also mentioned about middle market. So that's quite interesting because we're thinking about the merchant segment. I guess we've kind of thought about it in a fairly polarized way in terms of kind of the smaller ones are going to be one-stop shop. The larger ones are going to be more sophisticated and piece things together. What's the middle market kind of behavior, if there is one, in terms of do they kind of lean towards either one of those?
Yeah, it kind of depends. I think, and mid-market's very hard to quantify. Like, is $100 million revenue a year mid-market, or is it like 500 million? So I think what we tend to see, and